M&C Tire in Kalispell has been locally owned since 1979. From urban avenues to untamed trails, M&C Tire will help you conquer any terrain, just like the Griz will conquer the Jackrabbits. Unleash the power within your ride. Stop into M&C Tire at 1271 North Meridian Road in Kalispell or mnctire.com. M&C Tire, wherever you go, we've got you covered. Go Griz!
Welcome back to the Big Sky Now. We got the weekly media panel. Got Fritz Neighbor here in the studio. Got Ian Bivona, the Columbia Basin Herald, and Mark Nelke of the Coeur d'Alene Press. Got the crew back. Going to recap the Grizzlies FCS Championship game. Kind of a interesting game. We'll get everyone's reaction. We'll talk about a couple other things. It's crazy to think. It feels like just yesterday we were talking about, is Montana State and Idaho on a collision course to win the Big Sky? And here we're talking about the Grizzlies and the championship. Kind of a wild year for sure. A lot of fun covering the season. So we'll get to our reaction to the game and go from there. Why don't we start with you, Fritz? Fritz was down in Frisco covering the action, so got to go to you first.
Yeah, I just got back last night. The weather threatened not to cooperate, but it was a perfect Sunday for football, perfect Sunday for pro football. I don't think very many people watched on TV compared to last year's because college football should be on a Saturday. But, man, South Dakota State was good. I think, as I've talked to other people, that might be the best FCS team put together since Marshall in '96 when they got Randy Moss and just passed all over everybody. They were that good, and I thought they were especially good on defense. I thought Grizzly defense came to play for the most part. And they got gassed a few times, and they gave up 197 rushing yards, which is as good as anybody's done. But I thought they held them down pretty good and gave the offense time, chances to work. The offense just couldn't get going against a really good SDSU defense.
Yeah, that team was loaded. It felt like every time they needed to make a tackle in space, there's three guys around the ball. So, no, very impressive for sure. How about you, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed like SDSU was making big plays and big moments. Obviously, that first drive, getting the stop on the fourth and one from the 1 yard line, and then at the start of the second half, Montana's driving a little bit, gets that big catch across midfield, and then the fumble. I think it was still a one score game at that point. And then a couple drives later, SDSU really just kind of steps on the gas and make some big plays, really not run the score up, but, make it look at to that 23-3 final or whatever it ended up being. But I mean, that SDSU defense is unreal. 5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups. It was like a defensive clinic out there for a Montana team that's been able to put up points this year. So that was a little shocking for me. Obviously, we talked about how good they were on defense before the game, but I didn't really expect it turning out like that.
Yeah, when you watch them live, they jump out at you. Defensive head coach and Jimmy Rogers, former linebacker, so he had that clicking on all cylinders for sure. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, it's tough when you have a team that made it all the way to the national title game. Went after 3 or 4 weeks. We were wondering if they're even going to make the playoffs, and now we're talking about like what went wrong in the title game, and it's kind of too bad. It was still a great season, but you look at it. I was watching the first half, thinking, this is kind of they have a chance to win this game if they can do some things in the first half. Obviously, the tackle that Ian talked about right on the goal line. I mean, what a great tackle. I mean, he tackles the arm that has the ball in it and keeps him from extending it into the end zone. And that seemed to change a lot of the momentum. And then it seemed like I wrote down at halftime, I mean, it was the Grizzlies' game to win if they could execute. And basically, offensively, South Dakota State played the one good quarter, took advantage of some turnovers and stuff in the third quarter to kind of open up a gap. One thing I was thinking about offensively for Montana, I know McDowell had a bad leg, but it seemed like they had 3 really good receivers and never really using them to test South Dakota State deep. They threw, a few underneath routes and maybe tried to get them to break tackles after that, but it didn't seem like they challenged them as much with those guys as maybe they could have.
Yeah, no, I thought the same thing. Would have liked to see the playmakers get the ball more. Couldn't help but think as well about that McDowell injury. Definitely felt like it made a big difference. I have to imagine when he went airborne going towards the goal line, flying through the air, that's probably when that play happened. Because after that, he just didn't look like the same guy. Toughed it out. But, yeah, no, that was rough. And Yeah, no, you guys mentioned the two big plays that jumped out at me, that fumble after half and the goal line stand. You look at those two plays and they were driving in the second half. That could have at least been a field goal. You score that touchdown, that's 10 more points on the board. You have a ball game, puncher's chance. That, like Fritz mentioned, SDSU was really good, but I thought Montana had their chances. They played them pretty well, but over time they just wear you down. Kind of remind me of Michigan a little bit last night, where wear you down, grind on you, and just keep going. Big offensive line. Second half, tailed two halves, they kind of just ran away with it. But Montana had their chances, came down to kind of fundamentals. One thing that I do want to mention, South Dakota State's punter had a heck of a game. He kept pinning them deep, gave Bergen no chances on the kickoffs. I believe it's Hunter Dust when he does kicking and punting. But kid had a heck of a game, and when you take away one of the big X factors in special teams and you win that battle, that's a big one right there. So, no, overall, I agree with you guys. South Dakota State was just a great team, took advantage of the chances. Any other thoughts on the final or on the championship game? If not, I do want to ask you guys a couple other things. But no, just overall, Mark did mention still a special season for Montana to go from, we're talking about, are they going to make the playoffs, to, to all the way to here. Now they're back where they kind of used to be. So we'll see where it goes from here. I do want to ask you guys about the final FCS rankings of the year. I think they dropped yesterday or something like that, just to kind of get kind of a wrap up for the season here. But Montana was at number 2, Idaho at number 8, Montana State number 9, Sac State number 13, and UC Davis still slipped in at 24. So any thoughts on the final top 25 as it relates to the Big Sky? We'll start with you, Ian, and go around.
Yeah, one of the biggest thing that kind of jumped out to me was at the beginning of the year, we were talking about how there were 6 teams in the poll. This year, depending on whatever poll you look at, there's 4 or 5 teams. I think Weber State was the only one who didn't end up finishing in a poll. So it just kind of shows how these teams entered the year, obviously pretty highly regarded, and then they still kind of carried on that tune, entering the last poll of the year.
Yeah, no, it is funny. I feel like we started the year talking about this, and we're kind of wrapping up the year. I know at one point we're going, there could be 7 teams in the poll, but no, these teams are kind of the ones that jumped out. Mark, your just thoughts on the final poll, anything Big Sky related with it?
Yeah, not too much. I mean, poll's a poll, whatever. People vote for things. The good thing about FCS is you decided on the field. Now you do it in FBS, whereas the old days the polls actually meant something and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's nice to say, hey, we finished 8th in the final poll or whatever. But I mean, all Idaho remembers is they lost in the quarterfinals. So.
No, that's how it is. I hear that. How about you, Fritz? Just any final thoughts on that?
Oh, I thought it was interesting that the top 4 spots were manned by 3 Dakota schools in Montana. So something to look at when next year starts, and they'll have another poll before the season even begins. And one of the reasons I'm glad I don't vote anymore. The other reason, it's a terrible time suck.
Yeah,
Sunday afternoon. So
yeah,
but yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
No, I hear that. I know it is interesting. That was one of the things I thought too, was you look at the Dakota schools, the Montana schools, and Idaho. This region, a lot of good FCS football, really jumps out as one of the premier regions in that level of football, no doubt about that. I did think it was interesting just because we talked about it a lot earlier, but UC Davis landed at 24. I think 24 playoff teams. It should have been a playoff team, but that's a rant for another time. I could go on about that all day. We'll see if they finally get their shot next year in the playoffs, long ways away. But, I do want to ask you guys, I think we kind of did this at the end of the regular season, but now that the playoffs have had so many exciting moments, just wanted to recap kind of your guys' top 3 moments of the Big Sky football season, playoffs, whatever it may be. We'll start with you, Mark, and just kind of go around.
Oh, okay. I guess I would start, obviously covering Idaho. I would start with Idaho, just first time they hosted a playoff game, first time since the 1990s, and they hosted 2 of them. And then as a addendum to that, then they lose a bunch of their key guys to the transfer portal, which we haven't seen what's happened out of Montana yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with them in the next few days. But I think the fact that Idaho did so well, but also lost a lot of their key guys is kind of crazy. It's the world we live in. Be interesting to see how they reload and stuff like that. So that was one. Another one for the Vandals was playing on ESPN or ESPN2 or whatever twice against Montana and Montana State. That was kind of big. It seemed like the Vandals started drawing some big crowds again after years and years of not, I mean, for good reason. There wasn't that much of a reason to go down there. So, but now they got some excitement. They're drawing some people and they're ending up on ESPN. Another one would be Montana is one of those teams that when you think of the big, we talked about this before, when you think of the Big Sky, you think, Montana is Big Sky. And so to see a team, Montana be in the title game is a big deal for the Big Sky. And it's kind of like in basketball when UCLA and Arizona are good in the West, the West Coast basketball looks good when those two are good. So to see Montana back playing for a title is a good thing for the Big Sky. And I guess like if I throw in a fourth, like Dan Hawkins, no longer at UC Davis, that's kind of too bad. He seemed like a good guy to have in the conference. It's a little bit of name recognition. Good for him. Kind of missed, BSing with him at media day. So that's mine.
Yeah, had to give him one last shout out for sure right there. No, I feel that. And what you said about Idaho, very true. It's kind of the double-edged sword of the modern era of college football for a lot of smaller schools. If you're in Alabama or Georgia maybe, but even, FBS schools, if you got a guy who's a star, that's a good thing, but he might be on the way out because he had a great season. So it's kind of this double-edged sword where you want to root for the guy to have the best possible season, but then you got to worry about if they're coming back. I did see on Twitter something where so far no Jackrabbits or Grizzlies have entered the portal. Still a few days, so we'll see if any news breaks on that in the next few days. But that's Twitter. That's what I saw. Not full-blown journalism right there, but I did see that trending around. As far as you,
it's not full-blown journalism.
yeah. Right nowadays, I should say X. I guess Twitter, same difference. Everyone knows what I meant. But go to you, Fritz. Just your top moments from the season.
Oh, okay. Well, one of my favorite moments is when Clifton McDowell referred to the Brawl of the Wild as the Battle of the Brawl or whatever it's called. And next thing we know, he's selling T-shirts with that slogan on them. And then he played really well in the Brawl. Touchdown run where he got kind of met just past the goal line by two Bobcats and shrugged it off. That's probably number 3. Number 2 is getting to the title game, first time since 2009. I think the Grizz proved they belong there. They played a really good team, fairly tough. I think McDowell was hurt, although Bobby denied it afterwards.
Interesting.
He had that 5-yard run to get down to the 1-yard line right at the end of the first quarter. There was a play he had either right before or right after the muff punt, where the Grizz had yet another opportunity to couldn't take advantage. And he scrambled, and it looked like he had 20 yards of open space for him, and he threw incomplete. It's among about 4 or 5 plays that stick with you, and those 4 or 5 plays, you have to play perfect to be a team that good. They tend to stick out. Just like, Keelan White had a rough game. He fell on a pass route that would have been a completion for first down. I thought he ran the wrong route on the goal line once. He had a drop, just wasn't their day. And then number 1, it would have to be Junior Bergen pulling off what I call the Heidelberger. He had the punt return and kick return for touchdowns against Furman. Just what a dynamic player. He's a senior to be. He's going to stick around. He said publicly he is when we talk about the portal. South Dakota State, all their guys except for Bernowski are seniors. And the fact that they're so good this year has a lot to do with none of those kids got into the portal. They stuck around and wanted to win like 29 in a row, I guess. So mission accomplished.
Yeah, no, sometimes you just get that special group of dudes, and they had it for sure. It was just one of those years. We'll see how they bounce back next year. You said Gronowski has another year of eligibility, I believe. Is that right? I heard something rumored. Could he follow, I believe, as offensive coordinator to Northwestern? Something to watch. But, that's what I say. Nowadays on Twitter, you never know it's a rumor or just somebody making something up. That being said, Ian, just your top moments from the season, just kind of what jumps out at you. It was a fun year to cover for sure.
Yeah, I also had that Junior Bergen's huge game. So I'll sub that one out. I'll go with that the 2-point stop by Montana to be able to get to that title game against North Dakota State. Huge play, get to the national title for the first time since 2009. And then what was some little, I guess, under the radar ones for my other ones. Sacramento State going on the road to beat Stanford early in the year. Stanford didn't have the best year, but I mean that's still pretty impressive going on the road being an FBS team, especially with all the other factors going into that game.
Yeah.
And then this one, it's just something I think about probably once a week. Portland State's first 3 weeks of the year, going on the road and losing 81-7 to Oregon, and then coming back 2 weeks later and beating I think it was North America 91-0. It's just something I've thought about this entire year and I can't get it out of my head. So it's got to be in my most memorable list.
It'd be interesting if someone did like the stat research. How many times has a team got beat that bad and then beat a team that bad in like 3 week span? No, that is one of the craziest stretches in college football you'll ever hear of for sure. Well said, Ian. And that Stanford win was, I kind of forgot about that. That win over Stanford. That was a fun one for Sac State versus their former coach. So good job shouting that one out. Totally forgot about that. You know, we've mentioned it already, but that Griz win over North Dakota State, just that whole game, Junior Bergen's spectacular play, the goal line stand. I mean, that one I will not forget for a while. I will say this one didn't go in favor of a Big Sky team, but it was such a good game. I got to say that North Dakota State game versus Montana State, blocked PAT to end it. That's what playoff football is all about. Rooting for the Big Sky didn't go our way, but just as a football fan, that was just an awesome game. Had me sitting there sweating. I'm like, what is going on right now? So one of those games, and then it's kind of like a little under the radar as well, but Idaho State's comeback over Eastern Washington, just kind of a program that's kind of trying to come back, make a little rise. You come back 28 down in the second half. That doesn't happen every day, just a special comeback, first-year head coach, all that stuff. So it just kind of puts the program in the right direction. And, you know, I'm a fan of the underdog, so anytime a team comes back like that that's maybe a little doubted, you kind of got to root for it. So, no, fun stuff. A lot of great moments from this season. Well said, guys. We'll just get to kind of our biggest takeaways from the 2023 football season, 2023, 2024. You guys know what I'm trying to say, football season, and kind of wrap this thing up. We'll start with you, Mark. Just any big takeaways from the year?
Okay, I had a couple. One of them was a question I think you have earlier in the thing that we might have kind of skipped over, but the one I'll get to is we talked about running quarterbacks and stuff, and so the teams that have running quarterbacks, it seemed like those are the ones that didn't quite make it quite as far. The ones that like Montana State relies on their two quarterbacks to run quite a bit. South Dakota State has Gronowski, who's a good runner, but he doesn't run all the time, and surprisingly, he's stayed healthy. And Giovanni McCoy at Idaho, he's not really a running quarterback, but he learned how to scramble, and that kept plays alive. And so I think a running quarterback is effective if you use it kind of as an off, a secondary thing. But I think if you have to rely on one, I think you're just asking for them to get, like dogs chasing cars. So I think, it's good to have a running quarterback as long as that's not the main thing that they do. So then the other thing I was gonna bring up the question about what does it say about the Big Sky? I don't know if we're going to get to that later, having two teams in the title game the last 3 years.
Yeah, no, you're right. I forgot about that one at the end. We can just jump to that. We'll just throw it in now, but yeah, just mix it in.
All right. Well, I'm here. I guess I'll just take it over. I'm wondering if we're starting to see something kind of like in the FCS, kind of like the FBS, where in the FBS you got the Big Ten and the SEC are kind of up here, and the others are down there. I mean, that game last night. I mean, Washington's a good team. They got a lot of good players, but it just looked like Michigan was a better program, better, throughout offense, defense, and stuff like that. Washington, the things they could do against everybody else, they couldn't do against Michigan. And, you can kind of throw it this title game, Montana against South Dakota State. Montana's a good team. They did a lot of good things, but they weren't able to do a lot of those things against South Dakota State. So I don't know. Maybe, Fritz can speak to that a little bit more, if that's more of a South Dakota State being a once in a generation, last 3 years being really good like North Dakota State was before, or if it's the best, Missouri Valley Football Conference teams being just a little bit better than the good teams in the other conferences. So.
Yeah, it does feel like they're kind of solidified a little bit as the 1A, 1B in FCS football right now. That was a good comparison with the Big Ten and the SEC. Yeah, Fritz, if you want to kind of comment on that a little bit, just thoughts on Big Sky and where they sit on the national landscape, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think they made some good solid strides to get up where the Missouri Valley Conference has been, thanks to North Dakota State and lately South Dakota State. They're not there yet, obviously. Group was in the final scores. I think the offensive side of things has to improve. I think Mark made a solid point. It's important to have a healthy quarterback all the way through. I think it's a strong correlation. If you keep your guy upright and being dangerous, not only inside the pocket but outside, then you have a better chance. And I think I've seen some criticism of McDowell's play, but I thought he played pretty well, even though it might have been limited here and there, and he had a fumble. it's another case where Montana spent the whole year overcoming negative plays, even when they were behind the chain, and just couldn't do it against SCSU. But yeah, I think we're getting there. We meaning the Big Sky Conference. I think it's a much better conference than it was before Idaho came back and before it expanded to include UC Davis and Cal Poly. Tougher to get out of it. I think no pressure makes diamonds, and I think it shows in the postseason when clever teams do fine.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of depth. Montana State had their run a couple years ago. The Griz had their run. It feels like Idaho was close. Sac State's had a couple really good years. So no, there's a lot of depth. And to Mark's point, I will say too, these running quarterbacks, it's really nice against a bad team when you can gash them for a 50-yard run. But when the game slows down, a lot of time to game plan in a playoff game, all those kind of things, you need that guy who can roll out the pocket and make a good throw on point in a key moment, because it's hard to be one-dimensional and win. That's why a lot of these teams who run the triple option, all that fun stuff at the FBS level, they have success. But how many of those teams have won a national championship? Not in a long time. As much as I like running the football, you can only do it so much and win. So well said. Ian, just any thoughts on that and where the Big Sky sits on the national landscape, and then we'll kind of give any other final takeaways of the year and wrap this bad boy up.
Yeah, when you sent that in our kind of preview thing for this week, I was going back and looking at some of the past results for the FCS playoffs over that span. This year, obviously, 4 teams. Last year, 4 teams. And the year prior, 5 teams. In all those years, there's only been 2 teams to make it to the quarterfinals. In the coming years, I hope to see that we get some more Big Sky teams making it to those final rounds. Maybe not, obviously, we're probably not going to get a Big Sky on Big Sky title game for a bit. But I'd like to see some more of those teams make it to those semifinal rounds.
Yeah, no, well said. It's interesting to see. Really, Idaho's the big question mark right now, where they're really building so much momentum. How do they retool next year? Because it does feel like heading into next year, I keep thinking Montana State, Idaho, Montana, they're going to be right back ready to contend again. So it's definitely rolling in the right direction. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you guys on that one. Any other final takeaways on the Big Sky season? Only things I wanted to say is can't ever really write a team off. I was ready to kind of write the Griz off. I didn't know what happened after that NAU loss, and now we're sitting here talking about it making it the championship game. So I was guilty of that for sure. And, that's just the name of the game. I guess also, early in the season, experienced coaching staff, they're going to keep a lot of their tricks for later. The Griz did that. And the other thing, we've kind of already talked about it, but things move faster than ever in this NIL transfer portal era where you're building momentum. You got a team coming together, then you have 2 guys transfer, like Anthony Woods and McCoy for the Vandals example. Montana State got hit hard on the offensive line. So it benefits. It goes both ways, where you do get guys bouncing back from the FBS or transfer from other schools. But you really do have to adapt every single year and rebuild and retool. And it's more work than ever probably for these coaching staff and recruiters and all those guys, where it used to be you get a player like we had for 4 years, build your program around him. Now it's like, guy has a star season, he might bounce. So it's just a little bit different. That was one of my big takeaways. So credit to the programs who have figured out that balance, because it's hard and it's all kind of new. So that's just a big takeaway there. Things move fast. But any other final takeaways from you guys, Ian, Fritz, Mark? I know Mark kind of already gave his, but.
I got one more. Oh, okay, well, go ahead. I have a question for Fritz when you're. Okay, I was going to ask you, Fritz, since you were there, we talked about McDowell not then those 3 receivers not doing a whole lot. And I know McDowell's leg was hurting, but he can still throw. Were the receivers just not open? I mean, we can only see so much on television, but you can see the whole field.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I was going to bring that up earlier. South Dakota State's 2 safeties played really deep. So Bergen was mainly open in the middle. They ran some routes deep, but I was just so impressed with not only how deep the safety started, but how quickly they came up, and they just were all over the place. It was just a really hard defense to getting going. They tried some screens, most didn't work. I think the longest play from scrimmage was a 21-yard dump off to Osmo. Not really design screen. It was just more of a safety valve type of deal, and he got 21 yards. And even on that first drive where they tried to answer down 7-0 and could have answered if they maybe would have thought to get ahead on Adam Bach. That's who made the tackle. Their best player was unblocked. But that whole drive, their longest gain in that drive was 8 yards. They just dinked and dunked because that's all they could do. They took what was there, and it worked until the very end. And I think they ran pretty well the second drive too. And then they threw the ball a ton. They just couldn't really get anything going deep. I think Bergen got a lot of attention. I think Keelan could have played better. Aaron Fonts could have played better. But I'm sure McDowell would say he could play better too. But I just think most of the credit go to that defense.
Yeah, no, that I gotta agree there. That was just from like the pregame and leading up to, one of the things I kept seeing and reading and noticing. That team does not make mistakes, and they make you beat them. They're like, you guys like to throw the ball deep, we'll take that away. They don't really pressure the quarterback that much. They get to the QB with 4 guys or maybe 1 extra rusher. So not a team that really makes mistakes. So no, the Jackrabbits definitely deserve a lot of credit. But any other final takeaways from the season, anything like that? I kind of plead in my case with the whole transfer portal thing. That's my big takeaway. You just got to kind of always adapt nowadays, where as much as I like to root for a kid to stay all 4 years, you just never know anymore. But any final takeaways, Ian, or anything like that? Or if not, well said, guys. Fun stuff.
Mine was pretty similar to yours. Just we can't don't overreact to early performances in the year. That was my biggest takeaway from the year.
Yeah, I overreacted for about a day, and then it dawned on me that I'd seen this team bounce back from similar losses. So yeah, exciting year. Glad it's over, except, with Griz football, it's never really over. Just on to the next chapter, whether it's NIL stuff or recruiting in February or transfer portal.
Yeah, the modern era of college football. The show never stops. Ain't that the truth? Well, on that note, great stuff, guys. I'll do it for this week. Big Sky Now media panel. Thank you as always to you guys for taking the time to do this. It's much appreciated. And everybody who's been checking out the show all year, we appreciate you as well. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll figure out a plan for the off season and keep this ball rolling one way or another. So thank you guys so much. Thank you to everybody for watching, and that'll do it for the Big Sky Now.